And we're live. Welcome everybody to another NPM Open RFC meeting. Today's date is Wednesday, October 28th, and we'll be following along in the agenda that was posted in issue 268. I'm going to copy and paste just for everybody, just in case again, the meeting notes doc in chat. Feel free to add yourselves to attendees. I'm not sure, Roy, are you going to be able to help with notes, or we can share responsibility? Awesome.
Sure. Yeah, can take it.
Cool. Appreciate that. Quick acknowledgement of the code of conduct. All calls and all communication in our repos is covered under code of conduct. We ask that you please read it. Please be respectful of each other. And when people are talking, please raise your hand. And just be kind and thoughtful in these spaces. Also, a quick outline of the intentions of this call is to improve and move forward the NPM CLI and to discuss RFCs and move those forward. And any announcements? I want to open the floor for any announcements from folks. I guess one from us, we've been shipping weekly and actually almost a few times weekly patch releases to the NPM CLI. So be watching for, usually Tuesdays, we are actually posting about those. So the change logs there, you can see what we're working on. So we posted a blog post yesterday about a few of the releases that we shipped last week and the changes and expect more to come this week. So keep an eye out there.
Yeah,
right.
Maybe one quick announcement. Maybe not announcement, but just worth noting. I did a presentation yesterday on a GitHub online meetup, and I put together a quick deck that just demonstrates like the highlights of V7, right? Like workspaces, peer dependencies, all in like just slides that you can just like kind of browse in a minute or so, right? So if anyone is interested, like I put up the link on Twitter. Maybe I can also drop it in the notes or something.
Yeah, and I would also say yesterday we shipped improved looking docs website. So a big shout out to our friends on the registry team. Also, I know Edward Thompson has been working on that, who's the product manager there, has been helping out with that. So if you check out docs.npmjs.com, you'll see it looks new and improved. And I think there's still more changes to come there. So that's another thing to be mindful of. Awesome. So if there's nothing else, let's jump into the first item here, which is RFC 250, provide possibility to reference license file from Papiando.
Yeah. Is Papiando here?
No, unfortunately not. I know this got generated pretty late. Today, the agenda got generated late, so they may not have got pinged in time.
Well, I did have a second to take a look at this. I think moving away from SpeedX indicators in the license field is probably a non-starter. There's a lot of tooling that sort of depends on that. But certainly we could add another field to package.json, which has the license URL or something. What we could also do is just provide a way to show a license as a command for, given a particular package name. It wouldn't be too hard to kind of fetch it, crack it open, and grab whatever license star file we find in there.
Okay, that's interesting. Definitely I think we'd probably want to do that in tandem with adding a license, like a license reference, right? Because otherwise we could use the heuristic of the license file lives here usually, but I think it'd probably be like what they're asking for is also like I want to actually indicate where the license lives, right? Like, so introducing a net new like license URL or license file.
Right. Really, license file makes more sense than license URL because
yes,
the the reason being that like the license on the latest and greatest version of the code might change, but the license that a particular thing is distributed under is the license that's included with it.
Correct. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So that, I think that would make sense. To your point, like leaving the current license field as yeah, like a spit. How'd you pronounce that? How do you pronounce this? Spidex?
I say Speedix.
Speedix. Okay.
There's no vowels. You can pronounce it however you want.
I say Spitix.
Okay.
Spitix.
Okay.
Superdocs. You know, whatever, however you want to.
A license is a super doc. You're right. So yeah, the recommendation of license file and not license URL might be interesting for us to then, I think that would go hand in hand with then bubbling up that information in a subcommand, similar to like npm fund.
So I have my hand up. The common case is, of course, a single license, and the license file is going to be named license or license.md. That's not an argument against allowing it to be configurable, but in that common case, having a license file field makes sense because there's one license and it points to the file for that one license. But if there's dual licenses, you presumably want to point each license identifier to a different file. And I don't think anything would be worth complicating the schema for the license field. Like, for example, allowing it to be an array of Spitix identifiers or objects that point to the identifier and the file or something, right? But that's probably the best format, but I don't think that's worth the tooling churn.
Spitix already lets you specify multiple
licenses.
Licenses, yeah.
But each license is a string. I'm saying is that what I would see as the cleanest schema is that instead of a string, you can alternatively provide an object that points to both the identifier string and also a file path. But I'm not sure if that's worth the tooling churn because there's a lot of tools out there that expect the license field to be an array of strings. So if we accept that that's not worth the tooling churn, then the question is, if we add a new field, how do we avoid duplicating sources of truth, but also allow multiple files to be specified? Because if it can only specify the file for like one file, then I don't think it makes any sense at all.
You can also put multiple licenses in one file pretty easily.
That's also true, but that's also something that is not always preferred. I've actually heard legal teams ask those to be separated in dependencies at times. So like, and obviously that's going to vary from lawyer to lawyer, like everything, but it seems pretty critical that if we add this feature, that we add a way to if the author wants to support one file per license.
Right, an array of strings.
And I don't know what that would look like.
An object or something like that. Yeah, right. I kind of feel like we should sort of circle back to the use case here. I mean, we can guess at the use case by the suggested feature, right? Which is that somebody wants to see the license for a particular thing. That being said, like if you're using the Speedix indicator of MIT, you're sort of, I think it's a reasonable assumption that it's going to be an MIT license. It's going to grant you certain rights. Obviously, the source of truth is actually going to be the license file.
Well, and that's not even demonstrated in court, right? Like it's entirely possible that a license file that differs from a Spitix identifier, that the identifier could win because that is a programmatic explicit thing, right? Like it's just nobody's tested any of this in court. So
I'm very uncomfortable playing amateur lawyer, you know, except for strictly for entertainment purposes. So I think, you know, I think for this, like we really need to sort of circle back to what the use case is and make sure that the right people are sort of weighing in on how best to address that use case in a way that doesn't add. I mean, even the move to Speedix was like entirely controversial, kind of. It wasn't, or at least not without controversy at the time. And I know that an awful lot of thought has kind of gone into a lot of these things. So it's, you know, it's not just tooling churn. It's like entire committees of lawyers at big companies,
Right.
who I'm
So,
not eager to get on the wrong side of.
Right. Well, and that's the thing about, like, even if we wanted to play amateur lawyer, what matters isn't our legal interpretation. It's the aggregate legal interpretation of like entities across the ecosystem, which isn't something we can really like know in advance of asking a bunch of lawyers.
right. Wes, I know you have your hand up. I apologize.
Yeah, it's fine. No, it's good. I was only going to add, I think it is reasonable to say no. You can put it in this one file, not configurable. You can here's the file pattern, and call it a day. Like, to be honest, it doesn't need to be a super complicated thing. Like, GitHub looks in like 2 or 3 spots, right? And that's what it displays on its page. And you don't get a choice. You just get where it goes. And I think it's fine for everybody to do that. And then that also doesn't get into any real conversation about the legal side, because it's like, look, this is just what the tool does. The legal side of it has nothing to do with it. If you want to see the license and you type npm show license, like, it looks at license and license.md, all caps, and like, done.
Yeah, you can also have a file that says, like, you can use this under these 2 licenses. Here's the text is in these other files. Like, that's really common. So
we could even come up with a convention that npm show license or whatever could follow if we really wanted to.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
Like
where it's dual license, then it's MIT and ICS, then it says like license-mit.md.
Oh, I didn't mean that. I meant that, like, you could put markdown in your license.md, and npm would be able to read that and point you to the appropriate file.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's worth it, but like, that's just a possible future enhancement.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to go back with Isaac as well. Like, let's maybe give the feedback to this or ask exactly what they're looking for. If we want specific changes to or npm license command, then that sounds like it might be different than what's specifically here. Yeah. So maybe we try to we leave this on the agenda, I guess, for next week, and let folks add comments async, and then also if folks are interested about something like this or like support for multiple license, then we create a separate issue for that. Is that okay? Was there like more that we want to?
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, that works for me.
Cool. Then let's move on to the second item, which is 217 RFC add registry per package per organization. So again, this is the, oh, and looks like Isaac's commented. Yeah, feel free to chime in here.
Yeah, so I think, Wes, I apologize for last time not getting a chance to really kind of understand what it was you were getting at here. But it seems like the hazard that was brought up of, a company has a mix of @company/star and company-star in their registry hacks. NPM 6 will never use a different registry for anything that doesn't have a scope, right? It'll always use whatever the top level registry configuration. I think if we just don't support unscoped packages with this feature, then that whole concern kind of evaporates, right? You're not going to find yourself in a case where you have some things that are unscoped going to the wrong registry. And if, let's say you did, let's say you do have the @company scope both in your private registry and in your public registry. In that case, it's a lot easier to prevent squatting on a scope than it is squatting on every package that starts with your company's name, right? So at the even in that case, the hazard is so much smaller, like orders of magnitude smaller.
Yeah, it is absolutely way smaller. So if that is what we settle on, I think that is probably acceptable. That said, I could go look up the list, but I'm pretty sure I'm squatting on something like 25 scopes right now.
You heard it here first, folks. He admitted it.
I have to. I can't not. I have no option, right? Like the current situation is I have no option. I have to squat on these, or I have to go tell 40 teams and 2,000 engineers to go modify code, and I can't do that, right? So
Right.
I mean, I can, and I'm working on it. Don't get me wrong. We'll get there. But like, we're not there yet. And a lot of organizations are probably in a similar boat. So this would then mean that I have to go and tell them now we have to list all 25 of those scopes in their, maybe not. If they want to use this feature, no, okay, I guess basically the idea would be that they just can't use it to say, no, I really do want to get this one from the public registry. That is an unscoped package, right? I guess that's the only drawback there. I'm trying to, this is new.
Yeah. So
I'm
what,
figure out the edges.
what you would be able to do, if we support unscoped packages, you'd be able to say, npm install dash dash. I'd be able to say like registry equals internal.registry.com, right? And then express registry equals registry.npmjs.org. So I could say, express I want to get from the public registry. Everything else I want to get from my internal one. That's if we support unscoped packages. If we don't, what you would still be able to do is set your registry to your internal one, but, at Netflix / some public thing, I want to get the open source one, right? Or I want to use the open source registry for that thing.
Yeah, so this would be, so the case here that we'd be blocking would be if a team has an internal a package they own that they publish to open source, that they publish and has been shadowed or for some reason internally, but they want to make sure that they never get the shadowed version. Like say there's some internal custom fixes or something that only apply internally. They would not be able to say, I want this project to get it always from the public registry, which I think is an acceptable situation. I'm just trying to figure out what
so to be clear, that what I think that this feature solves in general is avoiding the need to program your internal registry to reach out to the public one. In other words, if you can configure your internal registry, then you can just make everything go there, and it has the rules for when to hit the public one and not, right? And that's what Airbnb did, because that was the only option available. If we wanted to avoid that and make the internal registry be just, very straightforward, and it only contains internal packages and only is requested for internal packages, the only way to actually make that possible with at least Airbnb's configuration is if we could support this new feature on both unscoped and scoped packages, because Airbnb both has internal unscoped packages and public scoped packages. So like, as far as reducing it to just scoped, I think that definitely dramatically reduces the hazard, although it does not eliminate it, because it's entirely possible that some engineers will not realize that they need to squat on the public scope, and then that creates that hazard. But it definitely mitigates it and gives them a solution. And like once they discover it, they can ask NPM to grab them the scope, perhaps. And I don't know. There's like mitigations, but I think that anything that I think it would be much better if we design this feature so that it could not be unsafe ever, even in a contrived situation in like NPM 6, let's say. And if we did that, then it wouldn't matter about scoped versus unscoped.
Yeah, I don't see any way that we can add a new feature that selects a different registry that is only supported by NPM 7 and doesn't break NPM 6 and is 100% safe, right? Like that's sort of like.
You'd want it to break NPM 6. That's I know that could cause an ecosystem fork in a published package, but I think that in the primary use case for this is in apps, not packages.
Right. It's hard to break NPM 6 by adding new fields to package JSON or to the config, because it's pretty open-ended, right? Mm-hmm. Like our config accepts anything that's like valid INI syntax, and I'm not really willing to say, well, we're going to start having JSON configs instead of INI configs or something like that,
Sure.
so that it will break npm 6. That would be awfully disruptive. Or like, extending it's an npm RC file, and we've always kind of said that it's INI syntax, but now we have this new thing. You put a /1 character in there in order to cause the old
that would be
INI
messy.
to die. Like that the hacks required to actually break npm 6 with this feature are pretty brutal.
There's nothing that could go in the actual dependencies key pair that would achieve it.
Well, I mean, so the other idea, this, where this gets us back to is we add a new spec type, right? Like a registry spec type, which specifies the registry and the name at version to be used, or name at Semver range. There are, that could also be handy. I kind of ran into this recently when we were we sort of cut a corner in the npm publish in v7, where now it only publishes folders instead of taking any arbitrary spec. And part of it was like, oh, let's see who complains about this. So I don't think anybody's really using this much, and we found out. And so I'm in the process of making that again accept any arbitrary spec. But one of the use cases that comes up is like, if you want to say like transfer a package, so there's something that's in the public registry today and you want to install all versions of it in your private registry, right? Maybe you're like mirroring or doing something weird like that, or transferring from one private registry implementation to another is another kind of common use case for that. The way to do that would be pretty nice is to say like npm publish and then the spec that I'm getting the thing from, which is over on registry A, but I want to publish it to registry B. So I almost need like two different registry configs. And if I had a registry spec, I could say npm publish registry : URL -- registry equals other registry, and it would like pull it from one and then send it to the other.
I like this idea personally.
And when you say spec, you're talking about like what would also be called a URL protocol? Like git : and FTP : and stuff like that?
Sort of. When I say spec, I mean specifically the package specifiers that can be passed as arguments to npm install. So a spec could be either file : and some path. It could be
Cool.
file : and some tarball. It could be, GitHub : username / package hash commitish. Any of those kinds of things we typically call specs or specifiers.
So can I elaborate one reason why I really like this?
Yeah.
One of the things that I've run into, especially when everybody went remote all of a sudden, one of the things we got a lot of complaints about was install timeouts. And almost every single one of them was somebody doing an install where the package was doing nightly builds. So the pacuments were like drastically larger than most other packages, right? And so it would time out. And what I had been thinking about doing for a couple of projects is publishing nightlies to the GitHub package registry, which maybe this will change in the future and those things will start to merge. But I was hoping to use the GitHub package registry as a source for nightly builds and then publish the primary releases continue to the npm public registry. If you did that, you could say in a test run, I'm test running against these 3 packages that I want to test against their nightlies. And so you could say like in my app, I want to test against the Express nightly that's actually on the GitHub package registry. During this install, I would say like npm install registry : GitHub package registry Express, right? But I'd want the rest of the things to come from the normal public registry. I don't want to mess with the GitHub package registry. And this would go for any registry. But the idea is you could have this sort of area where you get your nightlies from for specific packages if you need to do testing. And the only
Yeah.
other way to do that now, I think, is to publish under a scope or something, and then point the scope at the nightly. Or I don't know. You probably could hack your way around it, but this would give sort of a more explicit way.
Well, the way you could do it is npm install express at npm colon. Oh no, express at and then the tarball, the resolve tarball.
Right.
From
Yeah.
the GitHub package registry, which is fine, but then you can't do things like you have to pin to a particular version. There's other kinds of drawbacks to that.
Yeah, like the nice thing would be you'd be able to use the normal semver resolution, right? You could just say I want the tag. I want a tag, of next 7, right? And I want it to follow that, but I don't want to like bloat the pacument by publishing nightlies to my real project on the real registry.
Right. It's just it's such a heavy sigh for me because the thought of adding a spec just because a spec type, because it's threaded through so many different things. So the cost of implementing this feature did go up considerably by with that suggestion.
So with that said, though, is this something that we agree upon? Like that approach is like actually.
Well, and one other quick question, Isaac. Would it be possible for npm publish to realize that you're using a registry spec and also like, maybe error out if you don't specify engines.npm to be the right version? Meaning prevent people from make sure that if people are going to publish these specs that they at least have declared that they require that version of npm.
You'd have to backport that to 6. Is that what you're hoping?
No, he's saying put engines.npm so that 6 will refuse to install it.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the case where you put something in your package JSON manually and your version of npm install will fail on it. If it's like 7.1 that adds this feature and someone adds it in 7.1, I want to make sure that they publish that package and declare that their package requires 7.1.
So you're asking if there's a safeguard that exists already, which sounds.
Well, no, I know there's not already. I'm asking, could there be, and how much harder would that make Isaac's life?
As far as things that are going to be in a dependency that's published to the registry, right? So if you have a dependency with a registry specifier, yeah, we could throw an engines.npm in there in the thing that we actually publish pretty easily. And that will prevent npm 6 from installing that version.
Which is great.
Which is great. The thing that doesn't work for, unfortunately, is the top level app. If you run npm install and your root and engines.npm says you need version 7, it's just going to be like, yeah, so what? Well, you're not using.
Sure, but in that case, if your top level app, if you're using npm 6 or 7.0 or something, and you type npm install, it's going to crap out because it doesn't know what a registry spec is, and that's fine. Right. And then you just upgrade your npm.
Right.
Or ask your infra team to do it.
So,
I don't think that the engines.npm on publish thing is necessary to make this feature, as we've currently set it up, sufficient. I think that it would be a really nice safeguard that would have no bad effects aside from implementation complexity, and it would be nice to have it.
Yeah, any specifier that we add or change significantly, we talked about that. We talked about that with the Git repo path addition.
Right.
As well, that if we detect that when we're publishing, we should set engines npm.
Right.
It's a little bit of it's a couple lines of extra code that's only going to be there for bookkeeping purposes, and eventually.
Well, and hopefully it doesn't set it silently. Hopefully it requires the user to set it. I wouldn't want the pacument to magically get the engines.npm changed or added. I would hope that I have to, my package.json has to have it in order for npm publish to work.
Yeah, that's another conversation we could have for sure. I don't know if I agree or how strongly I disagree, but
it goes into similar territory to published prompts that we have had in the past, or I know we were talking about it, like expanding the ignore list, right? And then where we got to in that discussion was essentially recommending or warning about certain things versus failing, right? So warning that potentially you haven't set engines. When we see that spec, potentially we could warn. But again, that's into the territory of like a whole bunch of like pre-published checks that we could be doing on behalf of the community.
Right.
So
well, I mean, I guess what I remember from
Okay.
that discussion though was that some of those things that we're checking are like nice to haves, but this one is kind of a necessity. And so I feel like those are different categories. But yeah, I'm sorry, Isaac, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, we're getting a little far afield of the original suggestion here. I guess the question kind of comes down to, you know, if we limit it to only scoped packages, does that mitigate the hazard enough that we'd feel comfortable implementing, you know, separate registries for each for individual package names that are scoped? And then there's kind of a separate question, a separate idea, which I very irresponsibly just sort of threw out here. I apologize for that, about a registry specifier. And that's definitely a whole other RFC, I think. And some good ideas about that and good ideas for the use cases sort of surrounding that. But it does feel somewhat orthogonal to this, even if they address similar needs.
So where did we land then on this? Should we be asking them to change the RFC, or like we're not going to implement it as it's like proposed today? Or we wouldn't want to, sorry, not that we're going to implement, but we wouldn't want to implement the way that this is currently designed.
So if the only thing blocking it is the security concern here, then what if we in npm 7 started reserving that configuration so that we knew that, so that the npm 7 could handle it, and then we propose adding something like this in the future in npm 8 or 9, where we would then have the ability to, you know, well, it would error. We would say, if this key exists, this is an error, key style or whatever, in npm 7, and then, you know, 3 years from now it'd be supported without you having to add a registry spec type. Would that be like a reasonable middle ground? Like you'd say not yet, we'd like to do something like this in the future, but because of the security implications we have to hold off until we can do a full major cycle where it errors.
How does that change the, oh, you're saying like when all of the things that don't understand that field are gone?
Yeah, when npm 6 usage is like below 10% of the registry or something, we say, okay.
Well, sure, but reserving the config, are you saying that like they'd error out like eagerly?
Yeah.
That would be probably a breaking change, right? Like, right. So we'd probably have to ship that in 8, like start erroring in 8, and then
that feels
in 9.
That feels pretty costly to me.
Yeah, and given that there's more use cases for the registry spec, like that one solves this RFC, but also other things like the transfer to, you know, across registries use case, for example. Like, I mean, it feels to me like that's the better path forward.
Yeah, it might be. Okay,
whether
well,
it takes another RFC or not.
Yeah, we need that RFC though.
So can we at least give the feedback that if we were going to implement this is how we would have to do it, and it'd be okay. We would start airing out to reserve the.
That's.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
just
if it's going to take 4 years to do it, I'd just say like, why bother, right?
Right.
Can always just leave it there open for a little bit more, collect more feedback, and discuss it again next week.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm totally fine with that.
Sounds good. Also, because they weren't able to jump on, let's try to poke Baloran again, and maybe a little bit earlier for next week.
Okay.
Cool. Then let's move on to, and also, like, did we want to queue up like an action item to write that RFC? If we want, like, do we want this feature, or is this just like, if Baloran or somebody else wants to actually write the RFC, this is something we'll discuss.
For the spec type, right?
Yeah, for the spec type.
I mean, it seems reasonable to me, whether we wait a week or not, to basically say that, like, these are the only two paths forward we see to be able to solve this problem, right? Because, like, I think there's a sort of gray area here, right? That RFCs are a combination of a problem statement and a solution suggestion. And, like, if we're going to say that it requires a new RFC for a different solution, then, like, it might be worth saying that the problem space is valid. Here are the two possible solutions we see. Please either update or this RFC or write a new one with one of those two solutions, and then we'll evaluate it.
Yep. Okay.
So just to think about the contributors' time, I would hesitate. So do we actually think that a long 4-year solution is going to like inspire this person to like go that route? Probably not.
No, I'm not inspired to even do it. Like, why have configs whose only purpose is to break so that in 4 years we can maybe use them for something? Like,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, that seems like not a good use of our attention.
Yeah, I agree. My bad. Sorry for bringing that one up.
But no, this is why we talk these things through.
Yeah. So in that regard, it feels to me like the answer is we have one way forward, and it is this, but it needs a whole new RFC. If you want to champion it, go ahead. Because I just don't see presenting them with two options, and one of them being something we've basically said, no, like probably not super productive.
Well, I think the other solution up for discussion here is we implement it more or less as suggested, but only for scope packages.
Right, but Jordan's saying that wouldn't have solved their problem at Airbnb, and now that I'm thinking about it, that my concern was we don't have that problem, but my concern was that somebody would use it thinking they're solving some problem, and then it would cause a security hole. So to be honest, like, yeah, that might mitigate some of my problem, but then all they'd have to do is use it for a scope package, and we'd back in the same boat, right? Like, it could be as public at Babel or whatever, and then now it suddenly works, and I'm still trying to figure out why we're giving a RCE, because right. So
like,
so
the mitigation still rests on them knowing that they need to squat on the public scope, and that's not something that they'll necessarily know.
I think I'm gonna time box this.
Yeah, I will. I'll reply on the RFC that's there and say, hey, like, here are basically the options. We add a registry spec, or we limit this only to scope packages. Let's see if that will solve their problem. Because I mean, the thing that they were originally bringing up was, I want to set this scope to an internal registry, but except for this one package within that scope. So it sounds like limiting it to scope packages, at least for the poster there, is fine. And it's like when they do have a scope that's in both places.
Okay, if you can follow up and add comments there, that'd be great.
I'm comfortable doing this as written, but just for scope packages. It's opt-in. It's not going to end up in a situation where you have like nearly as high a likelihood of the kinds of hazards brought up. Like, it's not 100% safe, but neither is anything else we do.
Neither is running software on your machine.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so
I'm good.
It's a very small amount of unsafe. It's acceptable.
Cool. So let's move on. If you can give, I think I already saw that you were posting there, Isaac, but just summarize.
Yeah. I'll summarize
feedback.
this discussion there.
Yeah. So the last RFC that we actually have on here is 138. Add configurable data to HB header. So this is, I believe this is Mark that's been queuing this up and keeping this going. Or sorry, Makita, who I think has passed it off to Mark.
Mark,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't think there's been any update.
Yeah, there hasn't been. Been busy fixing other NPM7 bugs, but no, I mean, this still seems to me perfectly reasonable. We just add a headers blob, headers section in your npm-rc, and it will just work. And I think it pretty much just works today.
Yeah, it just hasn't been updated.
Yeah.
In the actual RFC, it needs to change
Yeah,
a little
just
bit.
the INI syntax needs a slight adjustment. We can have a separate, as we discussed last week, we can have a separate conversation about how to specify key value pairs on the CLI, which we don't currently have a way to do. But again, like that's sort of an orthogonal question, and similarly in the environment.
I know Roy added a few discussion topics that we haven't addressed in a while, as most of our discussions probably going to be moving into sort of the feedback repo that we've opened recently, which went, I think, live this past week or the week before. And so the first item that is on here is 228, so npm-ls by scope. Roy, did you want to maybe speak to this?
Yeah, it's very straightforward. Just having a way to list all the packages from a specific scope, which I think sounds reasonable. I mean, kind of wanted to use that even in our own repo, right? Like, well, I want to just npm-ls, npm CLI and see all our packages, right?
Yeah.
Another question. So a long time ago, many years, there was talk from NPM people about some sort of curating feature where people would be able to make lists of packages, and it was sort of like that awesome list repo trend that's been starting to float around. I think it would be great to be able to list scopes, right? Like I have scopes that group packages for that reason, but I'm wondering, is that curation thing just dead, or like, is there a reason it didn't move forward?
So this
Never heard of it.
Jordan, this is just using the npm-ls command, like within your project. I just want to I want to list everything.
Oh, you're not even talking about on the registry. You're just saying
no, yeah, it's just a
grep through node modules, but bound to scope. Yeah, that's okay. That seems like that should just work anyway.
It seems like it should take a pattern, right? Not just a scope, right? So you could do glob something.
Yeah, I think the discussion should be more around that, right? Like, how do we make it useful if we're doing it, right?
Right. What is the selection and more generally, like, what should sort of be the selection syntax for packages within the tree? This would also be handy for like npm outdated or npm update. I might want to update all of the things that contain TypeScript in the name, not just the TypeScript package, right?
Well, there's already a syntax for selecting things in a tree that's going to be exceedingly familiar to NPM users, which is CSS. Is there a reason we couldn't? And there's packages that do those parsing. Is there a reason we couldn't do something like that?
I mean, aside from my
like query selector
hatred of syntax. CSS, I don't. There's.
I mean, that is a reasonable emotion to have about CSS, but I mean that like the syntax itself though is the selection syntax does not seem to be the thing people have anger about CSS around, and Enzyme has chosen to use it for that reason, and also like there's other things that have adapted it because it's become somewhat intuitive for web developers.
It feels like a little bit of an impedance mismatch just because we don't have things like class and ID.
Yeah, you would definitely only support a subset, and but the things that were supported, like tag names would be package names. So it would basically just be like selectors plus tag, or the descendant selector and stuff like that. And but that also gives you free support for like pattern matching and like starts with and ends with and all the things that query selection has.
Yeah. So the bigger downside that, apart from just my own sort of like eyes crossing at seeing CSS on a command line, the kind of rational objection there is that it will require that users have an understanding of their package tree that they might not, we might not want to expect of them. So, like
it would require that they
is,
know what npm-ls says, right? Because it would be selecting on that output. Right.
So I think there's also a discussion to be had about, we currently show sort of this treeified version of the logical dependency graph, right? With just the words deduped when a node gets shown multiple times. It's challenging to go from that to like, what is the physical structure on disk, or even what things need to be updated. So I don't feel like CSS is the best fit, just because it's more ideal for a case where the person who's writing the CSS selector is expected to have some understanding of the tree that they're selecting on, right? So like, for example, if you're styling your web page for your markup that you created, like, okay, you know that this B tag is inside a div, is inside of whatever. But if it's, especially since, look at like all of the kind of discussion and challenges that we had in just sort of designing and speccing the overrides feature. I feel like.
So let me just say though, wouldn't this be an exploratory tool anyway? So you don't actually need to know. What you're trying to answer is, what is the structures, right? When you're using this. So you would be saying, I want to know what are all the direct dependencies of React in my project. And so you'd say like React caret, or well, not caret, right. What is that? That's greater than, sorry, greater than, took me a second there. Greater than star. And that would be find me all packages that are directly descendant from React. If you wanted to say, I want to find all things that are directly descendant from anything but adjacent to, right? Like, so that the idea here is what you're doing is exploring the tree so you can learn more about it, not necessarily starting with knowledge, right?
Yeah, I would say it should be almost of a subset of, or an extension of the spec syntax, right? So we support like this, the regular npm package argument spec specifier, but extend that with more capabilities like
it might be helpful to not allow that to be a positional argument, meaning to require that the extended form be explicitly annotated with a like -- something equals, but like, because I can see a lot of problems being caused by having npmls foo like allowed to be anything. But like either way, in order to provide this sort of functionality, we have to come up with a DSL and the semantics for it. So whether we use CSS or not, right, we have to create and define ways to do the thing CSS already does. That's why I suggested it. But like either way, we have to be able to say like, I want the direct dependencies, the direct defs of React, and I want to search within them. Like I want to list them all, or I want to show me all of the direct dependencies of React that start with the phrase React dash, or I want to show all of the packages like that are even transitively descended from React, but like with a different pattern or all at once. Right? So I don't know. It seems useful.
That stuff would be useful, and Wes, that's a good point. It is kind of exploratory. The other hazard is that, like Roy kind of touched on, we support npm ls, glob at 5 to show me all versions of all instances of glob at version 5.x anywhere within the tree. So then this kind of becomes, if we want, I'm trying to like sort of do the mental backflip of like, how do we have that as the kind of like the tag name in CSS parlance, and then a space, which is a valid thing to come after the @ sign, right? Because Semver ranges can have spaces within them.
That's kind of what I'm thinking of, like putting it under an arg instead of positional.
Right. Okay. Well, I don't think we should probably time box this, but
Yeah.
suffice to say that like that's we need a design for that.
That's a thing.
Well, can we?
When I
I think there's kind of maybe
W3
two
schools. I'm like, I'm in trouble.
I think there's like two action items that I see here, right? One is maybe we should write a fuller. Someone should write an RFC that talks about some sort of way to explore the package tree in the ways we've discussed. But I think regardless, npm-ls at npm CLI, for example, should just work because it's exactly what everyone would expect. Like
I agree.
maybe not with an at range, maybe just bare, but like that should work.
Yep.
And so it seems like that's the simple action item for this RFC, and then the optional complex follow-on is the bigger one.
Yeah, so just be mindful this was a discussion topic, so feel free to definitely, like, we can add a lot of this context back into that discussion.
Cool.
And then again, I think in the future, a lot of these items are going to actually move into sort of that feedback space going forward. So just be mindful that this may change, like some of these discussions might move there.
I do want to make sure that like whatever kind of selection syntax for packages within the tree that we land on, I want it to be something that will also work with npm update or npm outdated or npm fund or any of the other things where, you know, we take a package or a specifier as, or set of package names as arguments.
Yeah, you want some consistency across like yeah, agreed.
Right now it is consistent. It's just, it can only be name at spec.
The output is not consistent.
No, not even slightly.
Yeah, so that's one where we've discussed that as well, like where there's overlapping. There's no reason why we couldn't be carving out like one standard view that just is filtered based on those things, right?
Yep.
Okay. So moving on, we've only got about 5 minutes left here. There's another 3 discussions that were linked. The next one up was 4 that were linked. 266, add vuln level info to audit fix output. So again, that's discussion 266. So
I can speak quickly if you want. Super simple one. Maybe you can just turn it into an item in the backlog, but it's basically the proposal is to add, same as we have the level of each vulnerability, like at the end of just the install, just add that to the result of npm audit fix, I guess, or npm audit, one of these.
So just the summary, like the reify output does?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, patch welcome.
Very simple. Patch. That's a good comment. But yeah, this is definitely something we could take as queue up as like, I guess, backlog feature. And somebody can pick it up if they would like. Then the other discussion was 226, bring back pre-update and post-update. Again, Roy, I'm not sure if you've looked at this already.
I think Isaac already replied.
Yeah. Maybe. This seems like, yeah, we should put those scripts in there in libupdate.js.
So it sounds like the action item for those 2 discussions is to actually queue up a backlog ticket.
Yeah, they're both like super easily done and, in my opinion, pretty uncontroversial.
So let's move along here, see if we can get to all these with 2 minutes left. So the next is 229, discussion 229. Show the registry URL before running npm login and sending credentials, and that credentials are essentially entered. So this is a bit of, I guess, like the problem statement is, you know, it's a bit opaque, or we want to ensure that folks understand where that information is actually being sent to. How do people feel about this?
I really like the idea. Just having some extra confirmation. But yeah, sounds like similar as the previous ones. Like it will just sit in the backlog for a while. Otherwise, since it's not anything critical.
So there's no pushback, essentially, is like what I'm looking for there. This is something that seems easy to do and support.
Big thumbs up for me. I'm interested in why this would sit in the backlog, because this seems like something that should have just been probably always the case.
I didn't say it would sit in the backlog. Roy said it would
Oh,
sit in the
yeah,
backlog.
hey.
So,
because I know of all the other things going on.
yeah, there's a lot to do. Honestly, would love PR from the community to queue this up. By backlogging, I just mean we'll make sure that there's an actual ticket somewhere beyond, beyond just this discussion, right? So doesn't mean it's going to go gather a ton of dust, hopefully. Okay, very last one, if we can get to it, that was queued up here. So discussion 246, prompt when adding recently published. So again, Roy, I'm not sure if you had a chance to look at this.
Yeah, that's a very good one because of the example they provide. Like it's basically just the example is like a typo squat, right? And someone just squats on electorn and publish that. And that has like very little downloads, right? Because that's not what you expect. So they probably trying to target Electron users that maybe just had a typo when trying to npm install. So basically it would be a prompt, but so basically like they're proposing a solution, but like we can do the exercise of coming back to the actual problem, right? And I think the actual problem they state is a very good one. So yeah, that's what's where my mind was going, and then I added this to the discussion.
Yeah,
I'm
so
also a big thumbs up on this if it allows you to slowly ease the restrictions on the registry side about naming collision or naming closeness is maybe the better term, because that has bitten me so many times now, that it would just be great if you could start like letting things be more and more similar and just be warning on install instead.
Yeah, so I know Lyran has commented here about MPQ. So that tool specifically allows for configuration to check for these types of things, for like around npm install. So like length of package, or like a whole bunch of factors. I forget all of them, but yeah. Again, this is something probably that's going to take more time to flesh out what we would actually want to do here. So maybe we just keep this on the agenda for next week, because I know we're at time. So if anybody has any thoughts, feel free to add them to that discussion. Cool. Apologize, we ran a little bit over and got started a little bit late. We'll try to, again, ensure that we can get the agenda open up a bit early if we can next week. And appreciate everybody jumping on again. So hopefully see you next Wednesday. Ciao.
Bye.